You won't believe what just happened in a packed lecture hall because no one saw this coming. A well-respected professor, known for his sharp tongue and strong opinions, stood at the front of his university classroom, delivering a lecture that had nothing to do with politics. But suddenly he paused, turned toward the students, and made a comment that sent a wave of silence across the room. He sneered. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why people like Karoline Leavitt have no place in serious political discussions. A child pretending to be a leader? Laughable. The room was stunned. Some students chuckled nervously. Others exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. But what no one expected was for Karoline Leavitt herself to be sitting right there in the audience. She leaned forward, calmly stood up, and with a confident smile said, "Professor, with all due respect, let's talk about what's really laughable." The tension was thick. The professor raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting a direct challenge. Karoline continued, her voice steady but cutting through the silence like a blade. What's laughable is dismissing someone based on age instead of arguments. What's laughable is a professor who should be encouraging debate, shutting it down with an insult instead of logic. The professor scoffed, but Karoline wasn't finished. You tell your students to think critically, yet here you are, teaching them that dismissiveness is an acceptable substitute for discourse. If my ideas are weak, tear them apart with facts, not cheap shots. Because that is the difference between intellectual debate and just another classroom bully with a podium. A murmur rippled through the students. Some nodded, others clapped. The professor, caught off guard, struggled for a response. But before he could say anything, a voice from the back of the room shouted, "She's right." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. The power dynamic changed. What started as an attempt to humiliate Karoline Leavitt had become a lesson in grace, confidence, and standing your ground when it matters most. So, the next time someone tries to discredit you with an insult instead of an argument, just remember, sometimes the best response isn't outrage. It's composure that leaves them speechless. What do you think? Was Karoline's response the perfect way to handle it, or would you have said something different? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that shock and inspire. And guess what? The aftermath of that moment was just as shocking as the exchange itself. As the class ended, students gathered around Karoline, eager to talk to her, some even thanking her for saying what they had always wanted to but never had the courage to. A few whispered about how this wasn't the first time the professor had belittled someone in class. Only this time, he picked the wrong person. But the real twist? Later that evening, a video clip of the confrontation started making the rounds on social media. Someone in the class had recorded the entire exchange and posted it with the caption, "This is how you handle disrespect like a pro." Within hours, the clip went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, praising Karoline for standing up for herself with intelligence and poise instead of anger. Meanwhile, the professor, he wasn't having the best day. Reports started surfacing about how this wasn't his first time publicly ridiculing people with different political views. Some former students came forward, sharing their own experiences. What was once a simple classroom insult had now become a much bigger conversation, one about bias in academia, respect in discourse, and the power of standing up for yourself. Then came the biggest shock of all. A well-known media outlet picked up the story, inviting Karoline for an interview. And when she was asked about that moment, she didn't gloat, didn't mock the professor. She simply said, "Look, my goal was never to embarrass him. My goal was to remind everyone, especially young people, that your voice matters. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong in a conversation just because of your age, background, or beliefs. If you have something to say it, and say it with confidence." And that was the moment that turned a single classroom debate into an inspiring lesson for millions. So tell me, how would you have handled this situation? Would you have clapped back harder, or do you think Karoline played it just right? Let's hear it in the comments. And if you love stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there's a lot more to come. But the story doesn't end there. As Karoline's response continued making waves online, something unexpected happened. The university administration got involved. Professors are supposed to foster open discussion, not shut it down with personal attacks. And while some defended the professor, claiming he was simply expressing an opinion, others, including faculty members, spoke out, saying this kind of behavior was unacceptable in an academic setting. Soon a petition started circulating, demanding that the university address the issue. Thousands of students and alumni signed it, calling for more accountability in classrooms. Then came the professor's response. At first, he remained silent, likely hoping the controversy would fade away. But with the media storm growing, he finally issued a statement. Instead of an apology, he doubled down, saying, "Universities should be places where ideas are challenged, and if someone can't handle a little criticism, maybe they're not ready for public life." That didn't go over well. Comment sections erupted. People pointed out that what he did wasn't challenging ideas, it was dismissing them outright. The pressure mounted. And then, in a surprising twist, the university president released a statement. "While we support academic freedom, we also expect our faculty to engage in respectful and constructive discussions. No student should ever feel unwelcome for expressing their beliefs." Boom. That was it. It wasn't a direct reprimand, but it was clear. The professor had crossed a line. And just like that, what started as a single insult in a lecture hall turned into a national conversation about respect, debate, and the importance of standing your ground. And Karoline? She didn't just walk away from this moment, she owned it. She used it as a platform to speak about the challenges young conservatives face in universities, landing interviews, invitations to debates, and even new supporters who admired her ability to stay calm under pressure. This wasn't just about one classroom moment anymore. It became proof that standing up for yourself can have a massive ripple effect. So the question is, how would you have responded in her place? Would you have gone toe-to-toe with the professor or taken a different approach? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you love stories like this, ones that challenge the norm and make you think, then hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And just when everyone thought the dust had settled, something even bigger happened. A well-known talk show host, one with millions of viewers, picked up the story and invited Karoline for an interview. This wasn't just another viral moment. Now, this was mainstream. Sitting across from the host under the bright studio lights, Karoline was asked, "Were you afraid to speak up in that moment?" Her response? Not at all. "If you don't stand up for yourself, who will?" She went on to explain how so many young people feel pressured to stay silent when their views don't align with the majority. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was speaking for every student who had ever been dismissed, mocked, or belittled for having an unpopular opinion. And the impact? Massive. People flooded social media with messages of support. Parents, students, even professors reached out saying that her courage had inspired them. She was invited to speak at events, panel discussions, and even political gatherings. Meanwhile, the professor? Well, he wasn't exactly thriving in the spotlight. The backlash continued to grow. More students from past years started coming forward, sharing their own experiences of feeling shut down in his class. The university, now under even more pressure, announced they would be reviewing faculty conduct and making sure that all students, regardless of their political views, felt comfortable expressing their ideas. And just like that, one moment of disrespect turned into a movement. What started as a single insult in a classroom ended with Karoline gaining a huge platform, a growing audience, and a reputation as someone who doesn't back down. And here's the real takeaway. Sometimes, the best way to fight back isn't with anger or insults, it's with composure, confidence, and truth. That's what wins in the long run. So tell me, do you think Karoline handled it perfectly? Or would you have done something different? Let's hear it in the comments. And if you love seeing moments like this where the underdog comes out on top, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, there's a lot more where this came from. And just when everyone thought the story was winding down, it took another turn. A week after Karoline's interview, the university made a shocking announcement, one that no one saw coming. The professor, after years of unchecked behavior, was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The official statement was carefully worded, but the message was clear. The school could no longer ignore the growing backlash. They weren't just investigating this incident. They were digging into all the complaints that had surfaced since Karoline's viral moment. And then, something wild happened. Karoline received an email. Not from a news outlet, not from a supporter, but from the professor himself. It was short, just a few lines, but it stopped her in her tracks. Karoline, I underestimated you. You handled yourself with more grace than I did. I may not agree with you, but I respect how you stood your ground. Maybe I have something to learn from you after all. Wait. What? The same professor who had publicly mocked her was now acknowledging her strength? Karoline could have ignored it, could have gloated. But instead she took the high road once, again. She responded saying, "It's never too late for real discussions. I'd be happy to have one whenever you're ready." And just like that, the story wasn't just about standing up for yourself anymore. It became a powerful example of how even the most unexpected people can change when faced with truth, confidence, and a little humility. So what's the real lesson here? It's not just about winning an argument. It's about changing the conversation, about proving that strength isn't about yelling the loudest. It's about standing firm in what you believe while staying open to discussion. And if that's not a lesson worth sharing, I don't know what is. So tell me, do you think Karoline should have accepted the professor's words, or was it too little, too late? Let's talk about it in the comments, and if you love stories like this where the unexpected happens, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And just when you thought the story had finally reached its conclusion, another twist came out of nowhere. A few days after Karoline's last exchange with the professor, she received an invitation from the university itself, not just to attend an event, not just to speak on a panel, but to deliver a full keynote speech at a major academic forum about free speech, open debate, and the importance of respectful discourse. Think about that for a second. The same institution where she had been publicly mocked was now asking her to be the voice of a conversation they should have been fostering all along. The irony? Delicious. But Karoline didn't hesitate. She accepted the invitation, not to rub it in, not to take a victory lap, but to drive home a message that was bigger than just her. The day of the speech arrived and the auditorium was packed. Students, faculty, even journalists were in attendance, all waiting to hear what she had to say. She took the stage, looked out at the audience, and said, "A few weeks ago, I sat in a classroom where I was told I didn't belong in certain discussions. Today, I stand here proving that everyone belongs in the conversation." The room erupted in applause. She spoke about the power of standing your ground without stooping to insults, about how real debates aren't about tearing people down but about challenging ideas with facts and logic. She even acknowledged the professor, not to humiliate him, but to highlight that even those who dismiss you can sometimes come to respect you. And then, for the final shock of the night, when Karoline finished her speech, guess who was sitting in the audience? That's right, the professor himself. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He just nodded, a small but undeniable sign of respect. And that was the full circle moment no one expected. One moment of insult had turned into a national conversation. A heated classroom exchange had transformed into a movement, and a professor who once mocked Karoline had, in his own way, acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, he had misjudged her. So the question remains, do you think the professor truly learned from this, or was it just damage control? And what would you have done if you were in Karoline's place? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love stories where the unexpected happens, where the underdog rises, where the conversation changes, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because trust me, there's always another story waiting to be told. And just when it seemed like the story had reached its final chapter, something even bigger happened. Karoline's speech wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. Clips of it spread like wildfire across social media. Major news outlets picked it up. Influential figures from politicians to cultural commentators weighed in. Some called her a role model for young leaders. Others debated whether her confrontation with the professor was a sign of shifting tides in academia. And then, the biggest shock yet. A well-known political organization reached out with an offer. Karoline, we believe your voice needs to reach more people. How would you feel about taking this message on the road? Wait. What? That's right. They weren't just asking her to speak at another event. They were offering her a nationwide speaking tour, a chance to visit universities, engage with students, and spark real discussions on campuses where open debate had been shut down for far too long. Karoline had gone from being mocked in a classroom to becoming a national voice in a matter of weeks. And the professor? Well, his story took an unexpected turn too. Faced with growing scrutiny, he finally issued a public statement, not just about Karoline, but about the larger conversation her response had ignited. I may not agree with Karoline on everything, he wrote, but I respect the way she stood up for herself. Universities should be places where every student, regardless of their views, feels heard. I failed in that moment, and I intend to do better. Boom. A full admission. A rare moment of accountability. And just like that, Karoline's story became about more than just one debate. It became about the power of standing firm, the impact of handling conflict with grace, and the undeniable truth that when you refuse to back down, even those who once dismissed you may eventually have to listen. So here's the real question. Would you have accepted the professor's apology? Do you think he truly learned from this, or was it just a way to save face? And what does this story say about the way we handle disagreement in today's world? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and if you want more stories of bold moments, powerful confrontations, and unexpected victories, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. And just when you thought this was the peak of Karoline's journey, another game-changing moment arrived. As her nationwide speaking tour kicked off, universities across the country began reaching out, not to shut her down, but to invite her to speak. At first, some events were met with resistance. Protesters showed up. Some students even tried to shout her down. But Karoline never wavered. She stood firm, smiled, and said, "This is exactly why I'm here. If we can't even listen to each other, how do we expect to change anything?" And slowly, something incredible started happening. More and more students, even those who disagreed with her, started staying to hear her out. Debates broke out, not angry shouting matches, but real discussions. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about changing the way we talk to each other. Then, the moment no one expected. One day, after one of her biggest events yet, a familiar face approached her backstage. The professor. The same professor who publicly insulted her. The same professor who had underestimated her. But this time, he wasn't standing at a podium. He wasn't in front of a class. He wasn't trying to prove a point. He was just there. He took a deep breath and said, "Karoline, I've been watching. And I have to admit I was wrong about you." Silence. The room froze. And then he continued, "You didn't just prove me wrong. You proved to everyone watching that the way we debate, the way we disagree needs to change. I see that now, and I want to do better." Another pause. Then Karoline did something no one expected. She smiled and said, "Then let's start right now. Let's have the conversation you never gave me in class." Boom. Full circle. The professor agreed. And what started as an insult in a classroom turned into a public discussion between the two, streamed online, watched by millions. It was fiery. It was passionate, but it was respectful. And in the end, it proved one thing above all: you don't win by silencing people, you don't win by tearing them down. You win by standing your ground and proving your worth. And that is exactly what Karoline did. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think this professor truly changed, or was it just for show? And more importantly, do you think we need more of these real, honest discussions today? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you love stories of bold moments, powerful debates, and people fighting for their voice, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because, trust me, this is just the beginning.